pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The reason I'm up here this evening and not our supervisor is that she's sick. She's sorry that this came up. I spoke to her about an hour ago, and she sounds quite sick, and hopefully she will see a doctor soon and be back. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the prior minutes.
Motion.
And do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Let me make a couple of announcements. We are going to have a week from today at 1 o'clock here a presentation on on green energy, and in particular the LEED's rating system. The town has a statute on the books which we pass moratoriums for on green energy, and we want to find out more about it so we can do something before our moratorium runs out. The public is invited. We're going to have a couple of experts on the LEED system, and that's 1 o'clock next Monday here. Does anybody else have any announcements?
Yeah, excuse me. There are something like 6 different IT, information technology initiatives going on in the town right now, all the way from new hardware for the employees in the town hall, which will, and hardware that we'll share with the village, to a new website, to software for the recreation department, software for the building permit and inspection department and assessors, and email and so on. So if anyone's interested in participating with that, we've got lots of opportunities to help. Please leave me a message with the town clerk, or you can email me. The email address is on the website. Thank you.
Let me again make a plea for those people who are interested in serving on a committee. We do have some openings on committees. You can get a application from our town clerk and put your name in. If you have a specific committee you're interested, fine. If you just want to be on a committee, we can use help on a number of committees. The first item on the agenda, and I see John Lyons here, is continuation of the public hearing on the local law to amend the town zoning district with respect to a infill district at the beginning of Ackert Hill Road, and this is a petition by John McGuire. The public hearing is continuing. If anybody is here to speak about that, please step forward. If not, John Lyons is here.
Right here.
Oh, okay. John, if you could help us through this resolution. But first, I should entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second to
Second.
closing? All in favor? Aye. Public hearing is closed. And John, there's a proposed resolution here, and maybe we should consider that now. It's,
I can take you through the package that John provided for you today.
okay, and for board members, I believe it's number 6 in your book.
Okay, just to refresh your recollection, this is a petition for the establishment of a new neighborhood infill overlay district. We've been through pretty much all the process now up to this point. You just finished closing your public hearing. So there's a document package that's been provided to you that will allow you, if you so desire, to take a vote on this proposed amendment this evening. There are some preliminary pieces of procedure which need to be completed as part of that process. One of the things that you'll find that you have is a statement of LWRP consistency. There's a piece of this district that is located in the town's coastal zone, and as a result, it requires a determination by the approving agency that the application is consistent with our coastal policies. What we did in this particular case, we did not have we didn't receive any response from the Conservation Advisory Board to the referral on this matter. But what the board did do is it sent this out to Art Broad, which is the board's planning consultant, and on the behalf of the town board, Art prepared a coastal assessment form. And then based on that coastal assessment form and the information which we have received as part of the process, I have put together for you a proposed statement of LWRP consistency. The coastal assessment form is attached to that as an exhibit. There are 44 policies in our local waterfront revitalization plan that proposed actions in the coastal zone need to be matched up against. We did that, frankly, because of the nature of what's being proposed here. Very few of the policies are even really applicable to this particular action. And there are not really any impacts from this action that are going to have any effect at all on the coastal zone. As a result, we're recommending that you find that this proposed action is consistent with the LWRP policies, and the statement of LWRP consistency lays that out for you. The second preliminary item that needs to be completed as part of the process is for you to complete your seeker review. Again, in connection with this, the applicant was required to file an environmental assessment form. And then, your planning consultant, Art Broad, completed Part 2 of the EAF. It's been determined that there are no adverse impacts to the environment as a result of this application. And so because of that, we're recommending to you that you issue a negative declaration as your determination of significance in seeker. And basically, you're just saying that you've taken a hard look at the potential adverse impacts of this proposal and that there are no significant adverse impacts as a result. That's also in your package. Then there is a proposed amendment, which is also in your package. Pursuant to the instructions of the board, a slight modification has been made to the proposed amendment, which differs slightly from what was proposed by Mr. McGuire. As a result of the comments which were received by the town board at the public hearing, and in a desire to continue to preserve the village gateway and to avoid traffic problems that may crop up if subdivisions along Route 9 were to be allowed and driveways, there would be an attempt to connect driveways there. The town board decided that it was best not to include the 5.27 acre parcel that was originally proposed to be in this district. It's located right on Route, excuse me, right on Route 9. So the amendment has been modified to remove that parcel from the district. All the other paperwork has been conformed to that. It's not really a significant change to the amendment, but I just wanted to make sure that you knew that it's reflected in the proposal. So the amendment itself is very short because we're really just changing one map. The adoption resolution is the document that ties all of this together. It sets forth the procedural history of this, and in that resolution, you will be adopting your statement of LWRP consistency. Then you will be issuing your negative declaration as your seeker determination. Then you will be adopting the amendment, and then you'll be issuing some directions to John as far as the logistics of completing the amendment. We'll be getting a map from Dutchess County Planning, which will be attached to the final version of the resolution, which John will then file with the Secretary of State's office in Albany.
Do any of the board members have any questions for John? The one question I have, John, is this map that's the last item, is this the actual map? Because that, at least what's here, looks like the boundary cuts in half that parcel that we were going to exclude. This one.
This is the parcel that's out.
I thought it's going to be the whole thing. This is all one parcel.
Yeah,
What? Isn't that your understanding,
yeah,
Alan?
that's what we said to exclude, and it is.
Right, it's the whole parcel, not just this part of it, because otherwise you're drawing a line through, you're splitting
Through the
that one
parcel.
parcel. Was that your understanding, Michael?
Yes.
No.
Is it possible that the line you're looking at, I don't see the map.
Can you take a look at the map,
Here.
Michael?
Yeah.
This is the LWRP line, it's part.
No, here.
Well, this says,
Here's the LWRP, and here's the little piece of the parcel
what's
that's
the,
out of, that's
parcel?
in and not out.
Got it.
I think this is actually the line that defines the new district, is
Right.
this
Right.
dark
What-
line.
what-
What they're
It's
saying
fixed.
is that this is part of this parcel right here. It's this little dog leg into.
I'm not sure what,
Let me ask.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
that-
part-
I think that's one parcel. Mr. Schuster, maybe you can,
Yeah, Dan prepared that map, so I'm gonna ask
Oh.
him to come up and take a look at it.
The line as it's drawn continues the rear property lines of those properties on King Street.
They're saying that
And
this is.
This is part of that, the last lot there is part of that larger parcel, which is now being excluded from the district. It would be, it doesn't make it a separate lot. It just, it makes the zoning district line consistent with what's on either side of
Yeah,
it.
but would that allow the owner of that parcel to divide it at that line?
No.
Okay, that's really the question.
well, that's fine, but John, I think you have to weigh in on that. I thought that, at least I was advised by you guys that we should exclude the whole parcel and not draw a line through a parcel.
Well, I don't know if we talked about bisecting a parcel with the line. I don't think that it would be consequential in this particular case to have the line just cross that little neck of the parcel. If you want us to redraw the map, we can do that.
Right, can we pass this subject to the redrawing of the map?
Well, we'd
I
have
don't-
to make some changes to the resolution because there's it's not a legal description, but there's a verbal description of the the boundaries of the district in the resolution, so that would have to be rewritten.
You think if you and Mr. Schuster went off, you could do that, so we don't hold it up
We can definitely take a shot at
anymore?
that. Yeah. Yep.
Maybe you two could get together and then come back, and then we can do it. Does anybody else have any comments? Yeah, if you can do
Okay,
it, so we
we'll take
don't
a look at it.
hold this up for another session. The next thing is the continuation of the public hearing on the village fire department.
Joe, can I just revisit that for a quick second?
Yeah.
If
Do you want to?
Yeah, okay. Hi, Gina Fox, formerly of the town board, thankfully, but if you want, no, I'm just kidding, I miss you guys, I actually was going to sit there tonight, but if you're going to change it substantially or even a little bit, maybe the public hearing should just be retained open until.
We've had two
That's
public
just a
hearings.
I
This-
know, I
Let me
understand.
just finish. This,
Yeah,
I can
I
say
heard
that to
that.
you now. This was discussed, this amendment, several times. We did have public
Good.
participation.
I
so,
don't think you're going to have any problems with it at all, but that's just my 2 cents worth from the back of the room. I'll go back to my tea now.
Going to the next item on the agenda, which is the continuation of the public hearing on the village fire department contract. There's nothing new on that. I think we should continue the hearing. We're waiting to get some more information from the village. So could I have a motion to continue that hearing?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you give anybody that was here?
Pardon me?
Does anybody here want to say anything?
Does anybody want to say anything on the village fire contract? Okay.
Is this until the next town board meeting?
Pardon me?
Till the next town board meeting?
Yes, till the next town board meeting. The next item on the agenda is a presentation by the Open Space and Affordable Housing Committee. And let me just set the table a little bit for that, so to refresh board's recollection and people who are here tonight. Our comprehensive plan adopted in 2009 calls for diversity of housing, and it says that there's a positive benefit of ensuring diversity of housing, that many residents have expressed concern that they would be forced to leave when they retire, that their children would not be able to afford to remain in the community. Quoting from the comprehensive plan, clearly there's a need for a balanced housing stock that meets the community's diversity housing requirements. The zoning law, which was adopted at the same time as the comprehensive plan at the end of 2009, carries out the thought processes that went into the comp plan. Chapter 63, which deals with affordable housing and also called workforce housing, is not effective. It provides right in the statute, it's not effective until the town board adopts a local law for the administration of the affordable housing program. And this chapter in the zoning law has a rough plan, but leaves it to the Open Space and Affordable Housing Committee to fill in the details and recommend to the town board a workable plan, which, if accepted, will be passed into law. Under the plan in Chapter 63, which as stated is not effective, in certain districts, it calls for mandatory construction of 10% of the units. In all the other districts, which are mostly most of the town, it calls for construction on site or elsewhere as one alternative. Another alternative is donations of land, which the town is willing to accept. And the third alternative is payment of fees, which fees are payable beginning with one house and upwards. It also contains a density bonus for construction or payment beyond 10%, but it's largely undefined how the density bonus would work. The committee has been working maybe a year and a half on a working draft to implement it. The committee has come before the old board several times to present its plan. We have now 2 new members of that board. In the past, certain board members have expressed differing views on what should be in such a law. The committee is here to try to get a consensus of the board so it can go forward with what it should be drafting and presenting. And the question that is posed is, what does the board want to see in a draft law? And I think the 2 issues are density bonus and fees in lieu of construction. We do have here Ann Saylor, who is with Dutchess County Planning, and she is a guru on affordable housing and workforce housing in Dutchess County. So let me turn it over to Jonathan Mensch and Chris Liscombe, who are the co-chairs of the committee. And I must say, as liaison to the committee is a very hard-working committee. We do have various members of the committee here tonight, and I'm sure they will free to make comments as well as people in the audience. Jonathan?
Sure. I'm Jonathan Mensch. This is Chris Lipscomb. We're the co-chairs of the committee. And I think just to start, we'd like to just start by saying what we're defining as workforce or affordable housing. And workforce housing, as we're defining it, is housing that's available for people who live and work in town. And these are people who meet certain income requirements, but these are income requirements that are based around median incomes for this area. We're talking about income levels that are between 80 and maybe 110% of the area median, depending on how we ultimately define it. But the idea is that these are people like school teachers, these are town employees, these are people that are working in the local hospital. And we're trying to construct a program that's going to allow people that work locally also to live locally, and to create opportunities in which some of these housing units are going to be entered in a program that's then available for people, not just in the coming years, but hopefully in the coming generations. So we're trying to create the beginnings of something that is going to be in place for a long time. And in this case, if housing prices go up, if things change over time, there's going to be an opportunity always, we hope, for people that are working locally to also live locally. So that's an important first idea. And this is a different thing than some other government programs that are geared towards much lower income levels. We're really gearing this program towards people that are working in the community. And as Joe had pointed out, well, we've been through this process for a long time. I mean, I guess a year and a half on actually drafting the legislation. We've been at it for longer than that. But what has happened is that we started our process by taking a look at a lot of different statutes that exist in a lot of different municipalities, both in Dutchess County and then across the country. And what we found is that the dynamics that exist here are a little bit different than exist in a lot of other places in the context of a lot of other places that have affordable or workforce housing legislation have it set up in the context of much higher density development. So these are big housing developments. These are big apartment complex developments, and there's typically a program in which some contribution is made towards workforce housing in exchange for density bonus provisions, but it's all contemplated in the context of a much larger scale situation than we typically see here in Rhinebeck. What we've been struggling with is trying to balance the type of development that happens in this area in terms of both scale and also the kind of open space preservation initiatives that were put in place as part of the comprehensive plan. And that includes a lot of areas that really are very low density zoning. And there's some obvious questions that brings up in the context of workforce housing and how it can actually be created in areas, particularly areas of very low development or very low density, meaning that a lot of land needs to be allocated for a housing unit, and that creates some difficulties financially in terms of that amount of land being allocated for a particular unit. So we've really tried to balance those things. And as Joe pointed out, we've come up with really two ideas. And the first idea is a density bonus provision, which would be applied for larger developments. And we focused on larger development, and that would be done in exchange for either building on site or a contribution to a workforce housing fund. And that would be based around developments or a piece of land that could support 10 or more housing units. And we really started focusing on larger pieces of property because those pieces of property can get master planned as part of the town's mandated 4-step conservation subdivision process. And that's a really important concept because it means that if one of these large pieces of land is developed according to the way the town has set it up to be developed, that means open space is preserved. In the area, in 10 and 20 acre districts, that's 80% of the land is mandated to be kept as open space. In the 5 acre zone, that's 60%. That's habitat protection, that's environmental protections. So the idea is that in that context, the housing that is created is properly sited within that property in a way that can allow for a little bit of we feel a little bit of additional density, and we're asking for up to 15% in exchange for either building on site or a contribution towards the workforce housing fund. And that's the first part of it. And Joe,
15% would equate to how many additional units in Rhinebeck?
If everything was built out across the town, which is not a very likely scenario, but if it were to be built out, that would be 132 units. And we'd started the process by looking at what would happen if there was a 30% density bonus. The numbers came back substantially higher. It was about 300 units. And we felt that in the context of the overall projected town build-out was too much. So we scaled it back to half of that. And that's the number. So the 15% was really arrived at in the context of taking a look at what it would equate to were it to actually take place town-wide.
Well, let's just focus on the density bonus and let me ask if anybody in the public wants to talk or have questions, and then let me go around to ask for comments from the board. Is that an acceptable way of doing it, or do you want to discuss it first and then hear from the public? Let's hear from public. Does anybody have any comments on density bonus and how they'll work? I'm sorry, can you come to the microphone and identify yourself?
I'm Kelly Sherrod. What kind of guarantees are there that the money that they pay into affordable housing is going to go towards affordable housing? What kind of orders are set in place so that that actually happens.
Yeah, what we've got is we're creating a structure in which we would actually create a dedicated workforce housing fund. So all of the money that would be contributed directly into that fund. That we would then, and we've really started the process of looking at ways that we could use that money productively. And there's a bunch of interesting opportunities. One of them is to partner with a nonprofit, which we've already done in the context of the Gardens Project. Hudson River Housing is our partner for that project. Hudson River Housing also oversees about 800 rental properties, and in that scenario, Hudson River Housing would probably own it in conjunction with a town contribution to a particular rental unit, which would then be kept at an affordable price in perpetuity. So all of that money would be earmarked to a program that was geared towards either buying units that would be part of a workforce housing program. There's other possibilities too, and Ann can speak to some of this also. But another possibility that we talked to Hudson River Housing about just a couple weeks ago was possibly a program in which we would provide assistance for people that met the category that we're looking for in terms of income requirements, in terms of town residency, in terms of being local workers, which may actually help in making a down payment for a house. So if somebody fits the eligibility requirements, they would actually get some amount of assistance in buying a house locally. So that's another possibility. But in all cases, the money that was raised would be put into a fund that would be earmarked for these programs.
And run by,
It would be probably overseen by the committee, but we'd be doing that in conjunction with input from Ann at the county level and in conjunction with a non-for-profit partner.
And it would be subject to town board, the committee.
would that leave the town as being landlords?
Not in the context of Hudson River Housing actually owning the property. We originally had looked at that as a possibility and have been advised, and Ann can probably speak to that. She was one of the ones that advised us against it. So.
She's the guru.
And Sale, I don't know, I think you have a guru right here. These guys are pretty good. What I did want to say is that your local law will define how the money can be used. Generally, it says most of it needs to be used for, to create affordable housing, usually allows a small percentage for administration, because they do need to be administered. But it will be clearly restricted. I generally don't recommend that municipalities get in the business of housing. I believe that we should all do what we're good at. And there's people specialize for a reason, and that what the town should do is partner with, and you can partner with a not-for-profit, or you can partner with a for-profit, and then you have not only you have a restriction against the property. So if the town were to give somebody like Hudson River Housing money to build a building, whether it's rental or owner, there would be a restriction against that the town would be in place when it would need to enforce. So there would be some obligation on that, in that would have to be monitored. But, and the real thing is to work with a good partner, somebody that you know is going to be around, somebody you know that you trust, somebody who's really part of the community. And then you really don't have to worry about those kind of things. So, and I just did want to say one thing. I think your committee has been extraordinarily thoughtful. My experience has been that what communities often do is they just look at the town next to them and adopt the ordinance from them, and then when they go to implement, they find, oh, that doesn't work in our unique circumstances. And as Jonathan said, you do have some unique circumstances. And I think they've been really thoughtful in trying to balance those unique circumstances and the needs and demands of all the different parties involved in development and in the community. So they've done a wonderful job. It's not easy to balance all
about
those.
42 different versions and drafts.
It's not easy to balance all this, and what I always tell people about this is this is not a 2 + 2 question. The answer is not 4. It's not that easy, and so you make compromises, and I think they've really battled through. They have a lot of different philosophies of people on the board, and that's a good thing. You didn't have all affordable housing believers or all the market can do it believers. You had both of them, and those philosophies have gone back and forth, and I think come to a good compromise.
Anybody else want to, Michael?
I actually have a statement to read if I could.
Sure. And you'll give a copy to John?
Give it to John as soon as I'm done. Basically, I'm coming at this from a planning standpoint, given my role in the town here. The town board will be considering amending the affordable housing section of our zoning law to offer density bonuses to developers willing to pay money into an affordable housing fund. For a price, a developer can purchase the right to build more housing units than our current zoning law allows. That additional available density apparently created when the acreage requirements in each zoning district were raised. I have never favored this approach to providing resources to accomplish community goals. It undercuts the rationale behind the rezoning of our residential districts that is expressed in our community's comprehensive plan, invalidating the justification for our zoning laws area and bulk regulations, the acreage per lot deemed necessary to attain the goals enumerated in our comprehensive plan. It perverts the review processes for special use permits, site plan approvals, and subdivisions by exchanging standards based upon sound land use guidelines for standards that are subservient to the ability to purchase additional density. When our 3-acre district went to 5 acres and 5 went to 10 and 20 acres, the rationale to justify those limitations on density was that it was the preferred means to attain the goals of the comprehensive plan that was adopted in December of 2009. The zoning law adopted at that same time was designed to work with those district densities and in so doing attain those goals by limiting development in each of the zoning districts to a level that would avoid the sprawl and degradation of natural resources often associated with more densely developed communities. Rhinebeck wanted to avoid the mistakes other communities have made in allowing growth to overwhelm a community's environmental assets. The rules and regulations contained in our zoning law were designed to work with the new zoning districts, rules and regulations premised upon defined densities for each zoning district. They were not designed to function within the context of random densities based upon a fee schedule, which is a characteristic of a system that offers density bonuses in exchange for a set fee. For example, if an applicant has a parcel in the 5-acre district, net density rather than gross density is used to determine how many dwelling units can be placed on that property. The acreage associated with water bodies, wetlands, and steep slopes is deducted from the buildable acreage of that parcel. The process of determining net density and the justification for doing so in the 5-acre district is premised upon 5 buildable acres being available per dwelling unit. If a density bonus of 10, 15, or 20% is available for that property, the only requirement to attain that bonus being a payment of a set fee, the rationale for that established 5-acre district is set aside. The area and bulk regulations that pertain to each zoning district are supposed to be based upon the carrying capacity of lands within each zoning district, coupled with the regulations needed to attain the goals of the comprehensive plan. Paying a fee to exceed those densities cannot be justified on the basis of either the studies conducted in drafting our zoning law nor in the secret determination that enabled the town board to adopt both our comprehensive plan and our zoning law. There was also the issue of simple fairness. With the adoption of the new comprehensive plan and zoning law in 2009, property owners in the town found that their opportunities to develop their property had been noticeably diminished. The justification was the community's decision to implement these new regulations in order to enable the town to attain the objectives outlined in the comprehensive plan, with reduced density being deemed a necessity for attaining those objectives. The very concept of density bonuses, as is being presented, is premised upon the contention that greater density than allowed by the zoning law is in fact available and for a price can be purchased. What property owners were convinced to give up for the good of their community is now for sale. If greater density is in fact compatible with meeting the objectives of our comprehensive plan, it should be returned to the members of our community from whom it was taken, not sold as a means to raise revenue. Beyond the questions of fairness to property owners and consistency with zoning regulations put into place to achieve the objectives of the comprehensive plan, the density bonuses as envisioned in the draft affordable housing law offer no guarantee that any affordable units will ever be acquired. Perhaps the greatest weakness of our proposed affordable housing law from the standpoint of creating affordable housing is the opportunity for developers of housing developments, such as the gardens of the proposed Rockledge project, to feign to an affordable housing trust fund rather than actually build the number of affordable housing units the affordable housing law appears to mandate. I am not aware of any serious attempt to establish in our town code the means by which this affordable housing trust fund will create affordable housing. I don't believe anyone would seriously entertain the idea of our town either constructing or acting as landlord for affordable housing units. The idea of outsourcing the construction and management of affordable units is mentioned, but there can be no guarantee that such an organization can be found to take on this task. If the town is going to guarantee the affordable housing units are going to be built, there is no need for a density bonus, just a requirement that if you're going to build a set number of homes in our community, a percentage must be affordable. If you want something built, have a builder build it. The issue of density is perhaps the leading concern expressed at public hearings held during review of projects in the town that are designed to either attract new visitors or residents. The aspect of density that comes up most often is the question of increased traffic being generated on our town roads, increased traffic that a given development will potentially create. The majority of our town roads were created when Rhinebeck was genuinely a rural community. Route 9, 9G, and 308, federal and state highways, do not reflect the narrow, twisting characteristics of our town roads, characteristics the comprehensive plan emphasizes as both desirable in terms of our community's character and worthy of being preserved. Those narrow, twisting roads are not designed to handle the traffic often associated with densities associated with large-scale projects such as the Gardens or Grassmere. Both of these highly desirable contributions to our community, and thankfully both have access to either state or federal highways. Assuming the rezoning of our town residential districts and the reduced densities they represent is justified from the standpoint of our comprehensive plan, injecting a density bonus based upon an ability to pay for additional density will encounter that justification. So that's, from a planning standpoint, affordable housing is important. It's something we need to do. I don't see the need for density bonuses, and I don't see the justification for them under what we have done previously with our comprehensive plan and our zoning law.
Michael, when you were here last and you read a similar statement or made a similar statement, I had asked you that if you had been on the town board in 2009, would you have voted against density bonuses? And the answer was, yes, I would have. You haven't changed your mind, it sounds
No, I
like,
haven't.
from your statement, so you would have voted against it. And you do recognize, as a question, that the town board had numerous advisors, spent over $1 million coming up with a plan, had numerous sessions with the public, and at least that town board included density bonuses in its plan.
I also recognize that I've been on the planning board for about 10 years now, and I've been the acting CEO twice now. I deal with the people in the town of Rhinebeck. I deal on the ground with what's really happening in this community, not with theories, not with what might be or whatever, but what really happens. I was talking to someone today whose property had been upzoned. They wanted to create affordable housing on their property through an accessory dwelling unit. Due to the setback requirements and other changes in the zoning law, they probably can't do that now. They could have done it prior to 2009. So I acknowledge, Joe, a lot of studies, a lot of work went into that. But I'm just speaking from what I've seen, what I've experienced right here in Rhinebeck working with the community, not working from studies done by other people.
Any other comments from the public?
I hope you don't regret having me here tonight, but first of all, I want to commend both Michael Trimble and your committee, because the work that they all do is what makes Rhinebeck such a unique place. And my only issue, I'm not going to speak to the density bonus, but my issue is for affordable housing. When I've served on committees to hire teachers and the hospital is hiring nurses between $35,000 to $45,000 starting a year salary, I think the amount that is charged for the affordable housing is way too high. And I don't know that I have much support for that, but I know, much to their chagrin, I want all of my children to come back here and live, and I know none of them could afford it at this level. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Any other comments from the public or?
My name is Kieran Conway, and I agree with Mike that the density bonus should not be allowed. It's the zoning is set up to protect the communities from overbuilding, and why would we give a developer extra houses to put more traffic on the road just because he pays some money? Let him pay the money anyway and give him what he should build, and then we get the affordable housing, and we won't have to break the zoning. Thank you.
Ann?
You know, this always comes up, the density bonus. And at some level, it's a philosophical issue that you have to decide. But, and depending on how we look at this question, we tend to look at the lack of diversity of housing as one person's fault or the other. But the truth is that it's a community concern and it has a community solution. It's not, there's a group that want to blame the developers and then just let them build that. The developers want to blame the zoning, but the truth is, it's the zoning. It's where you're located with proximity to the city. It's your natural resources, it's your environmental limits. It's a lot of things. And so it's important. So I think to some degree, your zoning, you have your zoning, and a density bonus can be looked at as the developers contributing and the communities contributing. So just, you know, it's not one person's fault or the other. And I think that sometimes a density bonus at the right percentage can be a compromise. And a lot of people see it as sort of a giveaway to developers, just make them do it. And I'm a real believer in everybody in the community contributing to solve a community problem.
Yeah, and I want to say to the one question as to whether or not the housing would be built. It was asked a couple of different ways, and I know Michael had expressed concern, would it actually happen? The idea is to raise this money and to put it to good use. I mean, that's why we're doing this. We're not trying to raise a bunch of money and then have it sit there. We're looking to raise money and to actually invest in properties and invest in situations that's going to provide workforce housing. That's our goal. That's why we're doing it. And we've got to have the money to do that. And this we look at as one of the vehicles to get there. The next one is the one that, the sort of second piece of this, which is a contribution that gets made as new housing is built in general, which we also think is important. And we're going to have to work through exactly what that amount is going to be as new housing is built, what level that kicks in at. Those are some of the things we're going to come back and take a hard look at. But we're going to come and we're going to correspond that. We're going to compare that amount of money with specific initiatives that we're going to want to put into place to get these units built. But the key to all of it, and I think Ann can attest to this, if you don't have the resources available, you can't do any of these things. And maybe to Michael, it's somehow the idea that a cash contribution is sufficient. We need the cash. You know, we need to have the money to do these things, or they're not going to happen. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's where we're coming from on this.
I live outside of the village, and you're going to give a big corporation a density bonus, and they're going to use my roadways, they're going to use the water that my well runs from, the aquifer, and it's going to pay for affordable housing. That's me giving up the place that I live and the community that I live in. I think there's different ways we can raise that money than to give big corporations a pass on following what we've decided is the rule of law and how much land you need to build a house.
If you have ideas, specific ideas on how we can raise money, I'd certainly love to hear it. You can send a letter, email to the board.
As I read your ordinance, your comprehensive plan, the question of, there is sort of a requirement in New York state law that you look at housing diversity. And the issue of providing housing diversity in your community was left open. And it is something that you need to bring closure to in closing this. Am I right? I mean, it's not something.
Yes, we have a legal obligation to not exclude people.
And I'm just saying it's a little unusual. It's fine, but it's a little unusual that, you know, it was left, so it can't just be left. It does need to be closed.
Let's see, I think we have another gentleman who wanted to say something.
The lady can precede me if she chooses.
Go ahead, I'll speak after.
Okay. It seems to me...
If you could just tell us your name.
I'm sorry, John Hughes.
John?
Hughes. So my understanding is that this is effectively two-tiered. So in the first place, if I'm a developer, I'm required to build some sort of affordable housing. If I elect not to, I may pay based on some fee schedule to avoid that.
And also, just so everybody understands, and maybe I should have made this as a preface, the areas of higher density, which would be the R6000, which is right outside the village, and that's at less than a quarter acre, which is more akin to what we were looking at as some of the comps, it's mandated. You have to build 10% on-site when you do that development. If you want to take advantage of the senior floating zone, which is a senior housing floating zone, which is also at a higher development for senior housing, you build affordable housing on-site as part of that program. What we're looking at are trying to create mechanisms in the low-density areas that provide a contribution to this program. That's what we're looking at. So that's just to...
Thank you, that's very helpful.
I didn't mean to...
No, that's fine. So my question is structurally, is there a structural reason?
Closer to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. So is there a structural reason why for larger developments, which is what this seems to be keyed toward, you would not have included the requirement for X percentage of units to have been affordable, and then we wouldn't be dealing necessarily with density bonuses? They would be required to build or to pay in.
Yeah, the issue that we had when we started looking through this was that the areas that we were looking at outside of the higher density areas, the amount of land that was required per house was so high that you got into a situation like someone's supposed to take 20 acres of land and build a workforce housing unit on. The land itself is worth so much more than that workforce housing unit that it just is not a reasonable equation. And that's what we're trying to. We're trying to come up with something in which there is some kind of a financial feasibility around participating as part of this program. And we wanted to be cognizant that we created something that could work when it was actually put into practice. Putting something into practice that is just, an abstraction that nobody can actually comply with did not seem to us to be a reasonable approach to take if we actually want to create a program that can work and have longevity.
Okay, so basically, in order for that to have applied in lower density areas, it would have structurally been too significant a penalty?
Yes.
To a developer?
To anybody. I mean, to anybody that was trying to do something in a low-density area, in terms of infrastructure costs, in terms of the land required for that house, in terms of everything that's associated with it. You can get to a spot where the cost to build is 5 times what it would be sold for under the program. So it just became a thing of looking at it and saying, we can't expect this to actually work. So we wanted to create a situation in which we did insist that it happen in the areas of higher density, of which there are not a lot.
Right.
But then we could create a structure in which if there was a cash contribution towards the town's goals, first just mandated.
Right.
For every one of those houses that was built, that was mandated. On top of that, there was a density bonus program which was put into place just for larger pieces of land in order to generate additional revenue.
Okay.
Sally, you wanted to talk, or?
I'm going to finish my point.
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand that. I will say that I think the idea of trying to incentivize developers via these kinds of like 15%, 20% density bonuses have a tendency to turn around and, bite you in the behind down the road. Thank you.
Sally Mazzarella. Joe, you talked about the committee working for about 2 years on this. I think if we add all the years, it could be 5 years or even more than that. And if we go back to the beginning of the planning process of the comprehensive plan, God knows how many years went into that. And affordable housing was always a piece, was one of the components of the planning process in order to complete the comprehensive plan. And here we are today discussing many of the issues that we discussed 10 years or longer. It is very complicated. It is very complex. What we do know, what we do understand, is that as a community, we have an obligation to have a diversity of housing. This is something that is a requirement and that we have to fulfill in some way. And we have looked at a variety of opportunities and ideas that we feel would work for this community and work in a way that would bring harmony. It has been said today that we're not talking about subsidized housing. We're talking about people in our family, our neighbors, the people that work in our local banks, our local schools, the merchants in our community. And somehow we have to find a way to address this housing need. We talk about 15%. To tell you the truth, we don't know if 15% is the right number. We've talked about a variety of formulas, and we're not sure if those formulas are the right formulas for this community. But we feel it is time to do something. Let's take a step and let's see if it's going to work. We could always change it. we find out that it's hurting the community in some way, we're going to turn around and we're going to change it. We're going to address it. Because what we're all trying to do, we're trying to do what is best for the people that live in this community. We're not sure what the exact answers are and what the exact numbers are today. And it's too bad that we have to stand up here after all these years and say that we're still not sure. But it is a very, very complicated issue. Affordable housing, workforce housing is being addressed in many communities throughout Dutchess County, throughout New York State, and communities throughout our country. And we have to do something. And I'm really urging the town board to make a decision, and at this point, to just talk about a concept that we can go back and again play with the formulas and see what we think are going to be in the best interest of the community. Jonathan talked about in our comprehensive plan and in our zoning, we have identified high-density areas that will be required. They're going to be mandated to fulfill a certain percentage of affordable housing. We're dealing with the low-density areas, the areas that we have looked at as protecting so much of the natural resources that we have and what we consider precious in terms of environmental issues that have to be protected through low density. And so with that, the question is, can a developer, and we don't have to say developer, it could be any one of you, any one of us that has a parcel of land that we want to subdivide, and do we have the capacity, can we afford to do it with the low density zoning that we have? And so then we talk about fees that may help us in some way to create a pot of money, to create a housing trust fund that could create a pot of money so that way we could be creative in how we're going to address affordable housing needs for our community. But I urge the town board to take action. Let's do something. We may screw up, we may be making mistakes, but let's try it and change it if it doesn't work. The time is now to do something, please.
Ann?
Can I just say, I wanted to caution you to make sure that not only is the housing affordable, but that it be modest in size, both in the size of the house and the size of the lot. We would never recommend a small house on a 10 or 20 acre lot. Ordinances like this are designed to help people who grew up here, people who work here, to live in the community. They're not meant to be that somebody wins the lottery, right? That you get a little house on 20 acres or 10 acres. You should really look for opportunities to build more modest housing and building more near your centers. I mean, you have different goals in your plan, preserving your rural character. I have not read your plan, but most of them say supporting your centers. So that you would look for opportunities near the centers to do that, and that would address traffic issues. So just keep that in mind. It should be modest.
Does anybody else from the public want to say anything about density bonuses?
I'm Steve Cornicini. The only question I have about density bonuses, I don't have any problems with the density bonuses, but are they carte blanche to no matter where the property is located, what the infrastructure is? Obviously, a piece of property that's on a county road or a state road can handle the density bonus, but our narrow back roads can't. So is there a mechanism in place, or will be there a mechanism in place to just not carte blanche give anybody a density bonus just because they have a big piece of property? If the infrastructure can't handle it.
Well, at this point, we've got it identified for all of the larger parcels. I mean, we can take a look at that question, but we've identified it to be the large parcels in town.
But large parcels are
But it's not carte blanche in that the
Back roads, they can't handle the higher densities.
the development would have to comply with zoning laws, and there are other zoning laws that would come into effect, and environmental.
I mean, I haven't read that section, but, you know, the density, it's not like you're going to do a zoning review on the base density without the bonus. You're going to do a zoning review with traffic. And the reality is, I think that the density bonus, the extra units created by the density bonus when you have 10 and 20-acre zoning, it's not really going to drive a lot of traffic. You know, we're not, it does if you have a 500-unit development down in Fishkill and you give a 15% density bonus. But if you're having 10 or 20 out of 10 or 20 acre, you know, so I wouldn't. It'll be looked at, but I don't think it's.
Even in the lower density areas, we're looking at, for the most cases, a 15% increase on what's a low number, even for a large parcel, especially in the 10 and 20 acre districts. I mean, in the 10 acre, you know, in the 20 acre district, it's 200 acres to be eligible. So then you'd have 15% on top of 20 acres, 20 units.
Let's see if there's any other questions, and then I'll open it to the board to ask questions if they wish.
I don't think the planning board should make a jump to a decision, like you were saying. I think they should definitely review everything very carefully. And listening to the chairman of the planning board, who had some very good ideas and didn't think just throwing out density bonus is a good idea. I think there must be some other way to raise. I think affordable housing is a great idea, but there must be some other way to raise the money than crowding houses into other areas that aren't meant to be dense. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand it.
Any other comments? Let's see, does any of the board members have any comments or questions?
What the increased density would be under so many acres.
Yeah, that was going to be my.
Give an example of what the numbers are that could be helpful.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we look at just the minimum size that would be required, I mean, we're talking in the 20 acre district, this would not be applicable for any piece of land less than 200 acres. And if we're looking in the 10 acre district, it's 100 acres, 50 acre in the 5, but not really 50 in the 5 acre, because the way it's calculated in the 5 acre district, the density, any environmental constraints are subtracted. So a piece of land would need to be able to support 10 housing units. So it would be whatever the gross density was, less in the 5 acre, less all the environmental constraints. If that equaled 10, then it would be eligible for a density bonus. And in those cases, it would be 15% on top of 10. So we're really not talking about a huge increase in the actual number of housing units.
That number would be
That number, if we're looking at somebody that was building 20 houses, they would be able to build 23 houses.
What's the gross number, Jonathan, on the build-out analysis that?
If everybody in the entire town decided to pursue this and built it out at full volume, we're talking about 132 housing units town-wide. That's the extent of it. And that's
On a base of an additional almost 1,000, right?
Yeah. It's
So we'd build out, if we followed the current zoning rules and built everything we could, we'd build almost 1,000 houses, and this would add another 130.
132, yeah, on those parcels. So it's, well, really, in terms of the actual numbers and the actual number that would be associated with any individual parcel, we're not talking about much.
How many parcels are there in the town that are large enough to even talk about doing this with?
Do you know, remember, did Ted give us the number? Joe, do you remember?
I don't remember the number.
Yeah, we've got it. Ted had done a...
200-acre parcels?
And up,
Well,
yeah, 100 and,
There
Well-
can't be more than 5, 6 parcels?
Right, but it's the 200 acres, the 100 acres, and the 10 acre, but it's the 10 acre zone and the 5 acre zone.
And it's important, the reason that, just to, I mean, some people haven't been thinking about this the way that we've been thinking about it, but just to go back and start by why we selected the large pieces of land. And we did that because the town zoning mandates a 4-step conservation subdivision process. And that conservation subdivision process requires a huge commitment of open space, and it requires any development on a piece of land to protect the environmental resources, meaning wetlands, steep slopes, habitats, important view sheds. So if you're looking at a larger piece of land, you've got the ability to put possibly one driveway that would lead to a back section of the property that wouldn't be visible from the public roadways, and it mandates that that development be a clustered development. So we're looking at an additional small number of additional units in a clustered development on a large piece of land that's protected from a lot of the public view sheds.
Yeah, Michael?
Something maybe has been overlooked here, and it's called the multifamily housing provision of our zoning law. For example, in the 5-acre district, you need 5 acres for the first unit, 1.5 acres for each additional unit. So you already have a density bonus built right in there. Currently, we have a project bubbling up here in the town, and I assume that was probably the thinking that was for affordable housing, that sort of thing. The units this particular project is aimed at, the average income is $440,000 a year, 2 vacation homes. So we already have a system like that. So you put a density bonus on top of that, and it's going to be considerably more than the number of units in a certain development that you're talking about. And I think you should also understand that the cluster requirement for multifamily housing is not required.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that actually just came to our attention this afternoon, and that's something, Michael, that we're going to definitely take a look at. We weren't aware of some of that when we've been looking at it in the context of just single-family houses. We're going to go back and take a hard look at what that would mean in terms of multifamily and how that should work.
You were saying.
Please let her talk, and then if you could come to the microphone.
And I don't know if there's any developers in the room, but from a practical and economic perspective, developers cannot purchase an acre and a half for each apartment. I mean, normally you're talking 4 to an acre, 8 to an acre. So that's the sort of density that developers are looking for if they're going to build multifamily housing, to have to purchase property at an acre and a half. It's just financially infeasible on a base of 5.
Can you, I'm sorry, can you come up?
Ask my question, it's a real short one.
You really have to, the people at home will not be able to see it if you talk from there. We're not trying to be difficult.
Before, when you were speaking, you said large parcels of land.
Yeah.
How much is a large parcel of land? Because you went from 20 acres to 200 acres.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about?
And then, if there's some confusion, I'm glad you asked the question. When we're talking about large parcels of land, what we're saying are parcels of land that are large enough to support 10 housing units. So that would, the size of that parcel would be dependent on the underlying district. If it's in the 20-acre zone, it would need to be 200 acres. If it's in the 10-acre zone, it would need to be 100 acres. If it's in the 5-acre zone, it would need to be 50 acres. But in the 5-acre zone, you also deduct all of the natural resources before you calculate the density. So in fact, if they're wetlands, if there's steep slopes, all of that gets subtracted out. So in fact, the property would be, yes. So the size of the parcel would depend on the district development.
Look, could we go around the board and get various board members' views of what they want to see in a draft law? Who wants to start? Alan, what do you want to see in a draft law with respect to density bonus?
Well, I mean, one of the things I'd like to have is an answer to my question about how many lots are we actually talking about here? Because it seems to me there are very few parcels in the town that would even be eligible for density bonuses, never mind use them. I mean, okay, so that's the first point. Second point is, I would like to see the relationship between the density bonus program and the master plan criteria that would have to operate against. I mean, I'm kind of new on the block, so I'm not really sure how much sway the planning board and the zoning laws have to determine how people will use the density bonus. So the question is, how will they use it? You know, what are they allowed to do versus what they would be allowed without it?
Yeah, the way that the master planning process works is it's a 4-step conservation subdivision process. So the idea is that the important property assets, meaning view sheds, meaning natural resources, other things that are deemed to be important aspects of that, steep slopes of that property are identified. And it's a process through which, by identifying priority areas, a area is ultimately identified that can support the actual housing units. So it's really identifying the important areas that are going to be preserved and protected first, and then in that context identifying where the housing would be placed. So any density bonus units would be part of that same process.
Alan, the number of parcels are in the build-out analysis. I don't have that with me, but that has been cataloged, and you can see it. Let me push the question. Do you want to see this committee come back with a draft that has density bonuses in, or should the committee forget about it?
No, I'm not against density bonuses if they're administered properly, and the safeguards are there.
Bruce, what do you think?
Well, way back when we were doing this, that was one of the constructs that we put in. So it was, you got a big piece of land, it depends where it is, but it was either 60% open, 40% buildable, or 80 and 20. And we debated how we could get the affordable housing. But it was always the clustering, it was always the ability to do everything you needed to do within that same size piece of land, parcel that was cut out, segment that was cut out. The thing that I hadn't thought about was the roads. We hadn't talked about that I can remember. But we talked about this for years, but, you know. But I think there's some very valid points against doing it, but I think it's what we did the comp plan on, and I'd like to see the proposal.
Elaine?
I don't have any problem with the density bonus either. I actually agree with Sally that sometimes you just really have to go forward. This has been in the pipe for a long time. And I have total faith in all of the people who care so much about this town, all of them being on the committee, that they would correct any problems that they see. And I would agree with Alan that the only thing I would like to see is that all of the very valid comments made here tonight are taken into consideration.
And just on the traffic issue, any approval process is going to include the full seeker review, and that seeker review includes a traffic analysis as part of the.
Jonathan, can we talk about now the second topic, which is funding beside density bonus? And density bonus is part of the funding. There will be a charge for it. The committee is going to consider what that charge is, and it is a revenue-raising thing. But what about the rest of the funding for the workforce affordable housing program? What's the committee's thoughts on that?
Well, what we're proposing is some sort of a fee structure that applies to new housing that gets built in town. And we have gotten some comments back in terms of what would be appropriate, and some concerns that were raised that fee does not apply to people that are not really in a position to afford to pay it. So we're looking at a structure that would probably a per square foot number that would be applied to new housing that was being built in town, but we're considering some minimum square footage numbers that would be outside of that. So the fee wouldn't apply to, maybe it's a house of 1,500 square feet or less, with the idea that would be, those would be people that would be maybe more to moderate income level, but above those numbers it would apply. And we've gone around in terms of what that number should be, and that's a piece that we're going to want to put some more thought into, and we're going to actually want to equate it to some specific programs that we'd want to see implemented. But what we're trying to do tonight is to get some feedback from the board and hopefully a consensus as to whether or not this basic structure is something that the board would like to put into place.
So the committee is thinking of a per square foot fee based on when the certificate of occupancy is issued, there would be a required payment. At this point, the committee hasn't fixed on the amount of the fee. There will be exceptions to the fee to take in consideration construction of housing which is already affordable because of its size and likely cost. And so, are there any comments from the public on this concept?
And I think it's important to note that we arrived at this kind of a structure in the context of taking a look at how development actually happens in this town. It's not somebody comes in and builds 400 houses. It's much more of a scenario where somebody subdivides off one piece, an individual builds a house. I mean, that's typically how things go, or even if it's a professional builder, it's a professional builder that's building at a local scale, meaning they're building one house. And the housing developments that involve more houses, something like, I don't know, Stanford Court, that's off of Route 9, that's taken, I don't know how many years, but it's like 6, 7 houses, and 3 of them have sold in the course of 10 years. So this is not a situation that really equates with higher sort of density development and sort of big, large-scale commercial builders. So we're trying to create a structure in which, as housing is added, the way that it actually does get added in this town, there's a mechanism in place to collect a fee around that can then get used to support the program.
Any comments on this concept before I go around to solicit the board's view, because the committee's asking for direction? Any comments on that? Hearing no comments on that. Ann, do you have any?
I just wanted to say that I guess fee in lieu, where they're not going to build it is a very common standard, and it tends, again, to be used where you mandate it in areas that are denser, and then you allow a fee in lieu in the more rural areas of your community.
Hearing no other, or seeing and hearing no other comments from the floor, could we go around the board as to what they would like to see in a draft law? Let me start the same order, Alan.
Sure, thanks. My only concern is that I heard talking about 1,000 or 1,500 square foot exemption for the fees. And it seems like it ought to be a credit rather than an exemption. In other words, what you don't want to see, let's say it's 1,500 feet, what you don't want to see is a bunch of houses built that are 1,499 square feet to avoid paying the penalty on 1,501. So I think it'd be better to start the fees. So again, I don't know whether the right number is 1,500, but let's say it is, to start the fees at 1,501 rather than have the fee be whatever at 1,501 and zero at 1,500. It ought to be $1 more. It ought to start at zero at 1,500. Let's say.
Okay. Bruce, you want to address that?
You know my opinion. I think it's fine to do it with if you're subdividing, that kind of thing, but if you're taxing people for doing an individual house, I'm opposed to it. Whether it's a new construction or an addition or whatever. It just doesn't seem fair to me.
Can I just, but
yeah.
if it goes to the developer, my understanding of development is they pass it along. I mean, when they sell that lot to somebody who's going to build it, it's going to be passed along.
Well, but if I'm building a house, what am I getting for that? I know I'm doing it for the community, I know all this, but why isn't everybody else then? My point is, I'm not a commercial developer. I am building a house on a lot that I bought. I'm scraping together whatever I can to build it, and you want me to pay an extra whatever so somebody else, that's what you're asking me, right?
houses that would be built, the people, I would think.
This is, I walked out, but this is individuals, right?
I guess,
This
I
is
guess
a
I
lot.
have a difficulty of imagining somebody on 10 or 20 acres sort of scraping together, but you can talk more maybe to what his.
Yeah, well, I think Ann's
I
point.
get the idea of somebody scraping, but I sort of see them buying.
There's a lot of people here who have the ability to subdivide the land that they have to give to their children, and those children are going to want to build a house. And now it's going to cost those people who want to build that house more money for something that we took away from them basically in the first place. So I just don't agree with the fee thing.
Bruce, you were on, and Bruce is the only member up here who was on the town board when it was passed, but that scheme says that one house, there's a fee, that you had a fee that wasn't scheduled, but it contemplated one fee for developments from 1 to 4 houses. So it got down to the one house level, and then you had a different fee.
Yeah, but you're asking direction to the committee
Yes.
now. And I'm giving you my opinion on direction to the committee now.